مش موجود. محمد جاهز؟
جاهزين دكتور جاهزين.
يس. خليها معروضة Yes, good evening, and I would like to take this opportunity again to welcome our Professor Wa Xiadan and to say hello for her. And again, on behalf of the Regional Center for Space Science and Technology Education for Western Asia in Jordan, and the Regional lectures. Unfortunately, today still we are engaged with another virtual presentation in the Asteroids Day, and still it's going on. But you see, within half an hour, I hope that it will be finished, and most of the people, they will join our virtual room. So please, on behalf of all attendees, welcome you. And now the floor is yours. And please, you are welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for those nice words. Yes, it is me again. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm from a non-famous University of China in space law community. But my research in space law and policy has been steady for more than 15 years. So I hope my sharing of space law knowledge can be of helpful and inspirational to all of you. And hope this will be the beginning of our future communication. And I hope there will be more chances from my side to cooperate with you and with the regional center. So today's topic is the international legal regime for space objects registration. As you may already learned, space law is quite a set of principles and rules, but seldom of them can qualify as an international legal regime. And registration is one of it. So it's an interesting topic. And still, I thank you again for your participation of yesterday afternoon, and I look forward for your more active involvement in this lecture. You are welcome to interrupt me anytime to ask me a question or give a comment during the lecture, or in the end of the lecture. I will save some time for that, for a Q&A session. So why there is a need for a registration regime? Why it is necessary to register a space object? And what are the legal resources? What are the achievements and shortcomings in this legal regime and its practice? And also there is some interesting development in software, mainly the UN documents is very interesting in this regard. Also, we will have a little look into the future perspective, what will be becoming, will be relevant in the development of legal the registration of space objects. The registration of space objects is closely related to a big issue, to a big problem, that is jurisdiction and control over space objects. And also it is related to the responsibility and damage and liability caused by space objects. So registration clarifies jurisdiction control, responsibility and liability in a sovereignty-free area. In outer space, there is no territory, there is no sovereignty, state sovereignty. So registration established the link between a space object and the state. It's like our nationalities. In the law of the sea, every ship has to be registered by a state, and its nationality is symbolized by a national flag. That flag confers on the national state both responsibilities and rights, especially the right to exercise exclusive jurisdiction on the ship as long as it navigates on the high seas. The other part of sea, there was a sharing of jurisdiction between the nationality state and the coast states. But on the high seas, it is the national state can exercise exclusive jurisdiction. In air law, the regulation of aircraft nationality is very much similar. The registration state exercises exclusive jurisdiction on the aircraft, while the aircraft navigates in the high airspace above the high seas. So those concepts, this kind of concepts has been transposed into the space law. Space object is the term indicating the instrument through which outer space can be reached, explored, and used. Space objects is the objects launched or traveling in outer space. It can be a space vehicle with some payloads on board to be released in Earth's orbit. Any of those payloads, as from the moment when it is released, becoming an operational satellite, or a space probe floating towards a distant planet, such as the Moon or Mars. But in space law, in fact, we found no mention of the nationalities of a space object. However, the link between each space object and a certain state is very similar to the nationality link established for ships and aircrafts by the law of the sea and by air law. Why there is no nationalities but only the similar link? I think one plausible explanation is that it is not easy to see any mark or a flag on the space objects since it spends most of its lifetime in outer space. So what are the purpose of registration? The issue of registration of vehicles and space objects launched into outer space was raised before the ad hoc UN Corpus in 1959. Several delegations made references to the necessity for identification and registration of space objects. A later report on this topic noted that registration of space objects would serve several practical purposes. It would aid in tracking the objects, provide a means to notify other states, be useful to avoid physical interference between space objects and aircrafts, and aid in the retrieval of objects when they return to the Earth. So the primary purpose is assisting in the identification of an object recovered on the surface of Earth or involved in a collision with another space object. Also, it could promote the peaceful use of outer space. A complete and informative register would lessen the likelihood or suspicion of weapons of mass destruction being put into orbit. So it's also a measure to improve transparency of space activities. So registration makes known the exclusive jurisdiction of a state registry. Registration does not give rise to the jurisdiction and control of the space objects. This kind of jurisdiction and control on the launching state is inherent not depending on registration, but the registration, this publicity, can make known the exclusive jurisdiction of the state registry to let the world know that you are the launching state. Also, registration can meet other essential needs: publicity on the launchings, trajectories and functions of space objects, as well as on the link existing between each space object and the specified state. Facilitate the planning of space activities, the prevention of excessive crowding of certain orbits. Also, it is a means for channeling onto one single subject all possible responsibilities and liabilities in relation to the operation of a certain space object, and consequently to allow some measure of international control on states of their obligations under space law treaties and international law. And then, ultimately, it is helpful to identify the responsible or irresponsible, the liable party whenever a violation is committed or damage is caused. So it is a necessity to establish the registration regime. Let's look at the legal resources. Sorry. I'm sorry for this mistake from my mentor. Let's look at legal resources for registration. Article 8 of Outer Space Treaty. As you may have already known, Outer Space Treaty laid down the basic principles of outer space law. It entered into force in 1967, and it is an umbrella treaty. So it's that Outer Space Treaty has Registration Convention, Rescue Agreement, Liability Convention, and Wound Agreement. It contains the foundation of all the 4 other UN space treaties. The first sentence of Article 8 of Outer Space Treaty provides that a state party to the treaty on whose registry an object launched into outer space is carried shall retain jurisdiction and control over such object and over any personnel thereof while in outer space or on a celestial body. The core elements of this sentence are 2 legal terms: registry and jurisdiction and control. Registry refers to the National Registry of Space Objects. It is established and maintained by the state party to the Outer Space Treaty. This registry must be distinguished from the UN Register. The latter refers to the UN Register of Objects launched into outer space maintained by the Office for Outer Space Affairs, USA, on behalf of the UN Secretary General. Article 8 of Outer Space Treaty implies the existence of national registration for space objects. So it seems that without the first step of national registration, the practice of jurisdiction and control over space object in question is not very feasible. So what is the object launched into outer space? It is not specifically defined, an object launched into outer space, and there is no universal definition on the term of space objects. It is used by the UN space treaties and all the other related legal documents, but there is no definition. However, there is a common understanding of this term in practice. A space object is every object that was launched into outer space in order to explore or use outer space, as well as every object that is intended to be launched. So this is the common understanding. It is a man-made object that is launched into outer space or intended to be launched into outer space. So what is another key term? Jurisdiction and control. Jurisdiction and control defines the power of the state registry and the legal regime of outer space. Jurisdiction and control, it must be read as one block. Jurisdiction induces control, and control should be based on jurisdiction. Outer space is an area not subject to national appropriation by claim of sovereignty, but the state of registry is entitled to exercise its sovereignty rights over the registered space object. Jurisdiction means the legislation and enforcement of laws and rules in relation to persons and objects. Jurisdiction is decisive for the applicable law. Control means the exclusive right and the possibility to supervise the activities of space object. Control allows the appropriate state to exercise international responsibility for national activities and continuous supervision and Article 6 of the Outer Space Treaty. So control is a competence, more technique, is a capability. It is the right of the state registry to adopt certain rules to achieve the space object mission, to direct, to stop, modify, or correct the elements of the space objects and its missions. The phrase "shall retain jurisdiction control" means a twofold concept. It refers to the right of the registering state, but also this right is combined with obligation to exercise jurisdiction control and international responsibilities for national activities. There are some specific duties for the state party when it has such jurisdiction and control over a space object. As we have mentioned yesterday, in accordance with Article 9 of Outer Space Treaty, states they are obliged to adopt appropriate measures for environmental protection and to undertake appropriate international consultations when it is necessary. Also, Article 8 of Outer Space Treaty has to be interpreted in the context of Article 6 and Article 7 of this treaty. Article 6 introduces international responsibility for national activities, and Article 7 established the comprehensive liability of all launching states. Article 8 put the jurisdiction control over a space object in the hands of a single launching state through the mechanism of registration. So registration creates in a sovereignty-free area a chain of attribution between the launching state, the space object, international responsibility for space activities, and the jurisdiction and control for registering state. So these three articles, they have to be read, interpreted together. The attribution of space objects to states have some practical aspects for special consideration with regard to space objects launched by private entities. And these three articles, they have special meanings for commercial space activities, it requires a state party authorize these kinds of activities, continuous supervising these kinds of activities, taking responsibility for it. Also, there is a need for it to register this space object, not only nationally, but also providing the information internationally. Also, jurisdiction and control, this means that these three articles reading together means that jurisdiction and control over a specified space object can only be executed by one launching state, namely the one that has registered the object. The focus on a single state permits the identification of relevant national law that is applicable for the space object in question. Also, this registration mechanism is an essential aspect of outer space treaty and for the international space law. We must be clear on one point. Registration does not create jurisdiction control. It is making the jurisdiction control known to the world. It does not establish liability, but it could create a link when it causes certain damages. Actually, Article 8 is a concretization of the UN General Assembly Resolution 1721 of 1961. The difference between the Outer Space Treaty and this registration resolution is still of practical relevance today because certain spacefaring nations register their objects pursuant to this resolution because they have not ratified the registration convention. And also, this is of something for the UN-USA office because it maintains two registers of space objects. Article 8 of Outer Space Treaty implies that all space objects are registered, but this is not the same in this resolution. There is a presumption that not all space objects are duly registered according to this resolution. The resolution calls upon launching states launching to furnish information properly to the Committee on the Peaceful Use of Outer Space through the Secretary General for the registration of launching. So whenever there is a launching activity, a state is recommended to properly provide information to the UN. And also, the Secretary General will maintain a public registry of information containing all the information provided by the launching states. And in accordance with this registration, a registry of launchings has been maintained by the UN Secretary General, the UN Secretariat, specifically by UN-USA. This resolution, its recommendation did not refer to national registration, but rather to an international registration. And this is the fundamental aspect for the purpose of information sharing on space activities, for the tracing of responsibility and liabilities. And also, although this is a resolution, it is not legally binding. It only requires voluntary compliance. The space power, after this resolution was adopted, the space powers, they started regularly registering their space objects. But it was up to them to decide what information to provide. So I have to emphasize that there is a distinction between Article 8 of the Space Treaty, Registration Resolution, and the legal regime of Registration Convention. These are two sets of registration regime. This is it is relevant today because the ratification of the Space Treaty has passed the number of 100 state parties and include most spacefaring nations. And most of its articles has become international customary law. And the general obligation to register space objects is one of those universally accepted principles. So for states that have not ratified the Registration Convention, Article 8 of the Space Treaty and the Registration Resolution is the sole binding basis for the registration of space objects. And also, this is why this resolution is still matters in a way. So let's look at this registration convention. It improved the previous constitution. The legal resources are limited to one article in the Space Treaty and the non-legal binding resolutions. This is a binding legal document, and it entered into force in 1976. As of January 2020, as of currently, there were 69 state parties to this convention, and also there were 3 signatory states. Also, 4 international governmental organizations have declared their acceptance of rights and obligations under this convention, and this is allowed by Article 7 of Registration Convention. These 4 IGOs are European Space Agency, European Organization for the Exploitation and Meteorological Satellites, European Telecommunication Satellite Organizations, and Sputnik International Organizations of Space Communications. So this instrument has been ratified by most, we can only say most, spacefaring nations, but not by all of them. This means that some treaty countries register their space objects in a purely voluntary manner on the basis of the registration resolution. And that also means that there are some state objects, they can still escape registration. The Registration Convention have several links with other space treaties, with the Outer Space Treaty, the Rescue Agreement, and the Liability Convention with regard to jurisdiction and control, return of objects recovered by non-launching state, liability for damage caused by a space object. However, we have to clarify that these 3 other treaties, they do not use the state of registry as a connecting factor. The Rescue Agreement refers to the launching authority and thereby recognize that there would be objects that are not registered by any state. The Outer Space Treaty and the Liability Convention refers to the launching state, which would remain fully applicable, especially where registration has not taken place. So all 3 other treaties, they consider the possibility that a space object has not been properly registered. So they refer to the launching state or the launching authority as the connecting factor. Let's look at the main content of the Registration Convention. Registration Convention is a special law. It is a further development of Article 9 of Outer Space Treaty. This convention set out the main content is setting up a mandatory framework and provides for international and national registry. Certain data relating to each space object shall be included in an international register. This is very important development for space law, but this convention is far from being a sectoral instrument. We'll see what are the shortcomings of this legal document. The convention provides for two kinds of registry: national registration of space objects and international registration of space objects. The fact that the obligation to register a space object is laid on the launching state. This fact is important because it clears the confusion caused by appropriate state under Article 6 of Outer Space Treaty. By establishing that the obligation to register a space object falls on the launching state, which is allowable under Article 7 of Outer Space Treaty and under the Liability Convention, the Registration Convention determines the channeling of responsibility and liability on a single subject, the state of registry. So this legal regime is like a line sewing through all these documents, sewing through all the relevant articles and clarify the confusion. This channeling is not exclusive. It is possible that more states are responsible or liable with regard to a single space object. But any state victim of an internationally wrongful act attributable to a space object on any state or any national or a legal person having suffered from damages caused by that space object, they can identify the state of registry as a responsible or a liable state. This is why registration is important. Give us the information to attribute certain violations of a space object onto one state. But the Registration Convention leaves much unregulated and has been criticized ever since it was adopted. It became a legal document and then follows certain criticism. It allows states in joint launching to make their own arrangements regarding jurisdiction and control and separate those elements from registration without requirements. This could be a problem, leaves the discretion to the launching states, and a much more complex situation could happen in the circumstances of registration by international or intergovernmental organizations. While the public members of the registration can make their own arrangements regarding jurisdiction and control, or organization, even an intergovernmental organization such as the European Space Agency, it is not a state. It is not endowed with the authority to exercise sovereignty right, that is, jurisdiction and control. Only elements of these general rights and duties can be transferred to an international governmental organization, but never the whole content of the sovereignty. So such an organization would be obligated to designate one member state as the competent entity to exercise sovereignty authority over the object. In line with the overall concept of space treaties, especially Article 6 of Outer Space Treaty, it is very desirable to fill in this gap to ensure a clear location of jurisdiction control to one single state, despite the accepted role of international governmental organizations in registration matters, because we need a state party in that organization to authorize and supervise the space activities before launching and including its operation, the operation in debate. There are some important definitions in Registration Convention in Article 1 of this convention. Article 1 provides that for the purpose of this convention, the term launching state means that a state which launches or procures the launching of space object, a state from whose territory or facility a space object is launched. The term space object includes components, parts of a space object, as well as its launching vehicle and parts thereof. The term state registry means a launching state on whose registry a state object is carried. So there are three definitions. Two of them, launching state and the space objects, are similar with those in Liability Convention. The definition of state of registry is formulated only in this convention. As it can be seen from the sentences, the provisions, the qualification of launching states can be fulfilled by 4 criteria: by being the state which launches or procures the launching of a space object, or by being the state from whose territory or facility a space object is launched. It doesn't matter whether the space object or the related launching activity is governmental or non-governmental. In both cases, the qualification as launching state relies on the state party responsible for those activities. The question of whether there should be a hierarchical order in the location of liability according to the 4 criteria for becoming a launching state was one of the crucial points in the negotiation and drafting of Liability Convention. However, now it is commonly understood that the 4 criteria mentioned are equal to each other so as to provide a broad concept. Under these 4 criteria of launching states, 2 of them are action or decision-oriented. The state behind the actor who launches or procures launching gains the responsibility as launching state for the space object, which without this state act would not have been placed in space. The other 2 criteria are in contrast. They are object or territorial based, relating to the nationality of the launching set and the national connecting point of the launching facility. So this means that no state can lend out its territory to another state without becoming a launching state, as long as there is a launch happened within his territory. The same is true in reverse. Where a state rents the launching facility from a foreign state, it is also should be a launching state. There could be arrangement on the bilateral level under lease contract, but this contract has no influence on the qualifications as a launching state and the definition of UN Space Treaty. So it is an eternal matter between those states, but they are all qualified as a launching state. As I have mentioned that there is no universal definition of space object, So this is more like explanation than definition of space object. It is more like a clarification than real definition. Components, parts of a space object, as long as its launching vehicle and parts are included into the term of space objects. Even though the term is not defined, there is a common understanding, as I have mentioned, that space object means any man-made object which is launched or intended to be launched into outer space. So in consequences, not every space object has yet reached outer space. But the legal duty to register is only linked to the term of space object when that object has been launched. So there is a difference. It is intended for launch and it hasn't reached outer space and there is no need for registry, but it could cause certain damages, so it is still space object under the liability convention. The term space registry means a launching state on whose registry a space object is carried. The qualification as a possible state of registry is restricted to the launching state of a specific space object. So to be a state of registry, it has to be one of the launching state. But the launching state does not equally become a state of registry. Registration Convention Article 2 provides that only one state can register a space object. If there are two or more launching states for the relevant space object, the state registration is only one state party of this group of responsible launching state, and it has to be determined between them. National Registry. Article 2 of Registration Convention provided for national registry. Whenever a space object is launched into Earth orbit or beyond, the launching state shall enter the space object in an appropriate registry which it shall maintain. The UN Secretary General shall be informed of the establishment of such a registry. The contents of each registry and conditions under which it is maintained shall be determined by the state of registry concerned. So the obligation on the launching state with regard to national registry is to establish such a registry and to enter it in it any space object launched by this state. So this article established a binding obligation to registry nationally. This is an essential element for registration convention, and it is more than Article 8 of Outer Space Treaty, because Outer Space Treaty only implied it provided for the existence of registry and only implied this is an obligation. The state parties, if they have launching activities, they shall maintain appropriate national registry and thereby inform the UN Secretary General the establishment of such a registry. Also, the launching state should register the space objects launched into outer space into such registry. What if the state of registry is not a state having launched or procured the launching of the space object? Or it is not a state that has landed its territory or facility for the launching? And this is becoming quite more common because of a commercial space activity, development of commercial space activities. So a satellite in orbit, its ownership can be changed. The new owner of the satellite replaced the original space registry, and also it may enter this space object into its national registry. In this case, the actual action of launching state does not conform to the formal requirements of state registry. So it is only a launching state, but it is not a state registry. With this is also one can deduce from Article 6 and Article 8 from Outer Space Treaty that a state registry is automatically a state responsible for the space object's activity. And this is not depending on the degree of jurisdiction and control that it can effectively exercise on that object. But this owner or this controller of the satellite, it is not a launching state, but it could be a state registry. So it breaks down the links between all these space treaties. So this is those commercial space activities has brought the challenges to the existing legal regime, which we'll deal later, especially in the UN document registration practice resolution. What if there is a joint, it's a cooperation launching activity? As I have said, registration shall be effected only by one state. That means in the case of joint launching, only one of the launching states will have to register the space object. So Article 2 of Registration Convention determines how to deal with this kind of issue. Where there were two or more launching states in respect of any such space object, they shall jointly determine which one of them shall register the object in accordance with paragraph 1 of this article. Bearing in mind of Outer Space Treaty and without prejudice to appropriate agreements concluded among these launching states. So where a space object's launch or operation involves several states, parties should determine who is the state of registry. This choice has to be determined by agreement among these launching states. Usually, when they decided the state of registry, they also decide the jurisdiction control of that space object. Although the allocation arrangement might be different, the jurisdiction and control shall not exclusively pertain to the state of registry. Sometimes it is one state can exercise jurisdiction and control of that space object, but it is another state is qualified as a state registry. However, these agreements cannot affect the responsibility and liability of these states towards third parties. There are some very interesting cooperative agreements on the implementation of joint space objects. For example, the International Space Station, the Intergovernmental Agreement for the International Space Station between Canada, United States, European Space Agency, Japan, and the Russian Federation. The International Space Station is not placed into the space as a result of one single launch. It is rather composed of different elements, launched at different moments, and later assembled in space. It had to be decided whether the station had to be considered as one single space object or a set of different space objects. The solution preferred by the drafters of the Intergovernmental Agreement was the last one. Each element of the space station has been considered as a separate space object and should be registered separately. Let's talk about the international registration. Article 3 of Registration Convention gives the UN Register a mandatory basis and establish open access to the information in this register. It is the publicity given to the registration of space objects that provides the most useful tools for a better implementation of the international regime of registration established by UN space treaties. And this also the publicity is the purpose of the International Register. It is kept by the UN General Secretary, but operatively by UNWUSA. The information in this register is full and open, has full and open access, and it's available online on the website of UNWUSA. As a quick and efficient working tool, UNWUSA created an online index of objects launched into outer space. In addition to the information obtained by official notifications from the member states, it also has certain information in green, highlighted in green, in order to give a complete overview on space objects. This information, additional information, is extracted from the World Warning Agency for Satellite, COSPAR, and official press release, and also sometimes media sources. So they provide additional information besides the registration information provided by the member states. Let's look at some numbers to see what have been achieved through the registration regime. 42 member states to the Registration Convention have notified the Secretary General, the UN Secretary General, about the establishment of national registries. This is more than 20 shorter than the states that have ratified the Registration Convention. There is a resolution register. It is established in 1962 in accordance with the General Assembly resolution. The more than 430 documents have been issued containing the registration data. There is also a convention register. It is established in 1976 under the Registration Convention, and more than 940 documents have been issued containing registration data. Over the years, the Russian Federation and the United States has done a very good job in providing registration information. Their practice has been stable. Usually it is they submit information several times a year to provide the information on the satellite they have launched into outer space. These two registers, they are complementary in nature. And according to this online data, these registers concerning more than 8,200 space objects. And according to UNWUSA website, over 86% of the space satellites, probes, landers, manned spacecrafts, and space station plus elements has been registered with the United Nations. 86% is quite a number. So this is clearly something, and the UNWUSA is proud of this achievement. The UN Register of Space Objects is the only source of information provided by governments and international organizations on all types of space objects. The function of this register, it established the link between launching state and the space object, and it can serve as a central register of objects launching into outer space. It provides the for space party additional means and procedures to assist in the identification of space objects. It also provides data needed for the implementation and application of other space treaties. So this is quite something. The figures gives us the impression that the registration mechanism works well in practice. But what about the shortcomings? Is this enough? According to Article 4 of Registration Convention, the information of the International Register contains that the name of a launching state or states, appropriate designator of the space object or a registration number, date or territory or location of launch, basic orbital parameters, and general function of the space object. So these are all the information that need to be provided by a launching state or by a state of register. But this is clearly not enough. And this regulation, this information provided by this convention presents some shortcomings. First of all, the information that a state registry is required to furnish under Registration Convention, it is sufficient to identify the proper subordinate orbit path of the space object, but it is not accurate enough to allow any form of effective control over the activities performed. It's quite general information. Especially the expression of general function of the space object is extremely vague and open to divergent interpretations. The result is that the state parties did not generally provide any relevant information on the real or specific activities carried on by their space objects. On the other side, it is obviously understandable when the space object is performing unitary or dual-use functions. In fact, a great number of satellites do that. In many cases, the description of the general function follows the standard categories of science and application in very vague terms such as Earth observation, telecommunication, or navigation. So, in practice, a military function of satellite must be described in a general, abstract manner and does not give away adequate information. Another shortcoming is due to the absence of a definite time limit for the furnishing of the information required. To provide that information shall be given as soon as practicable. This is equivalent to grant the state registry a wide margin of discrimination. So it is no surprise that in practice that in some cases, the information has been given a few years or quite some years later after launching. Also, in case of an accident, it is essential to trace the origins of the space objects have caused the damages that the space. In order to do that, the space object needs to be properly marked with a name or other sign permitting a rapid identification. Although this is usually done in practice, but this registration convention only requires the state registry notify the presence of a mark containing the designator of registration number of a space object, but not any further requirements on the marking requirements. And also, each state registry may provide the UN Secretary with additional information concerning a space object, but This transfer of additional information is only a recommended practice, but not an obligation. It hasn't specified the nature and possible content of such information. The selection of adequate useful information is at the state discretion and may be sent to the UN General in any form, and there's no time limit. There's no time limit for providing this additional information. There are a number of examples of states providing additional information. In some cases, the information provided is clearly additional. For example, the transfer of such information to the UN Secretary General by the Sovereign Union, in the 1980s concerning nuclear satellite or military satellites, they provide information about this is a nuclear. There is a nuclear reactor on this satellite. France also transferred to the UN Secretary General additional information concerning space objects in its national registry, such as maneuvering to withdraw from the orbit. There's a deorbiting operation, or there is a correction of the orbital position, or there is a maneuver to transfer non-functional satellite onto a graveyard orbit. So this is very useful information, this additional information, but it is only a recommended practice. It's not an obligation, and there is no, it is irregular. The practice is irregular. So how to overcome these shortcomings? Clearly, the registration convention provisions are not adequate. It is not sufficient enough. And the issue has also been raised in COPA's legal subcommittee. Ever since this convention entered into force, there is discussion about how to amend it or how to interpret it. Firstly, however, although this convention is not perfect, the ratification of the convention by all spacefaring nations and the implementation of its terms by state parties in good faith is a positive step forward. It is hopeful that COPA's work can at least lead to some improvements in that direction. So to improve its ratification, to enlarge its scope of application of this convention is a good sign. Secondly, the changes in space activities since the registration convention entered into force have entailed a necessity for more specific obligations and international legal regime for registration. The continuous development of space technologies, and also there's an increase in the number of states carrying out the space activities. There's an increase in international cooperation in peaceful use of opposite space. And also there's an increase in the activities carried out by non-governmental entities. So space activities, the actors, and together with the space technological development has made the scene much more complicated than in the 1970s or 80s when these conventions were adopted and first implemented. So all the information to be furnished to the UN Register and enhancing adherence to the registration convention is becoming much more important than before. So there are some improvement being introduced by the UN General Assembly resolutions and other documents, although it does not formally or officially amended or interpret the convention, but these documents have provided some very interesting examples example about how to push forward development of registration regime. First of all, let's look at the resolution we covered yesterday. The principle relevant to the use of nuclear power sources in outer space of 1992, the NPS resolution. So to minimize the risk involved, Principle 4 of this resolution requires a pre-launch notification, including information on the result of the required safety assessment, because it is dangerous to public to use nuclear power sources on satellite, on space objects. So this principle resolutions requires that they should conduct a safety assessment, and also they should release, the launching state should release a pre-launching notification, including that safety assessment. Principle 5 requires that a notification of the malfunctioning of such satellite with NPS on board, with risk of re-entry of radioactive materials to the Earth. In case there is a malfunction, if the satellite with NPS on board is returning or has the risk of returning to the Earth, the launching state should release a notification. So this is also kind of registration. It's a transparency about the activities. The most interesting resolution, soft law document on registration is the General Assembly Resolution of 2007 on recommendations on enhancing the practice states of international intergovernmental organizations in registering space objects. This registration practice resolution is the result of a discussion process in the legal subcommittee of the UN Caucus in the period between 1998 and 2007. It's a 10 years discussion. Taking into account the need of regulating commercial space activities, because since the end of last century, the growing involvement of non-governmental entities into space activities has made the regulation of space activities much more difficult and complex than before. And this resolution aims for a universal accession to and acceptance of the provisions of Registration Convention. The several recommendations were made to achieve a more consistent and uniform implementation of this convention. And concrete proposals were made to achieve uniformity in the type of information to be provided, and also to provide additional appropriate information to the United Nations, and also to enable the supervision of space objects in orbit. As I mentioned, there is a chance of changing the ownership of space object in orbit. And this could cause some legal issue for the registration of space objects. So this registration practice resolution provides certain answers to all these questions. Another interesting development is in another GA resolution, the resolution of 2013 on recommendation on national legislation relevant to the peaceful exploration and use of outer space. The importance of national legislation has considerably increased due to the privatization and commercialization of space activities in recent years. The first layer of the legal regulation of space activities is represented by public international law. The second layer consists of national law adopted by individual states implementing their international obligations and regulating non-governmental space activities. The growing involvement of non-governmental entities has strengthened the role of national space law as an instrument to ensure that all space activities are carried out in compliance with obligations arising from international law. Space law is different from other branches of international law is that the states are responsible for all their national activities carried out by governmental entity or non-governmental entity, doesn't matter. So this is why the state must be very careful in authorizing and supervising their national activities because they are responsible for these kinds of activities. And also the registration is a kind of supervision of this kind of the space activities carried out by private companies. So the legal subcommittee of UN COPUS have approached this issue, these commercial space activities, from different angles over the years. For example, the concept of launching state, the registration convention, and also then the recommendation on national legislation. The national legislation recommendation resolution, in its preamble, it is clearly declared that this resolution does not amend or interpret the space treaties, but can serve as a reminder of what should not be forgotten in the process of drafting national space legislation. Also because the working group on this topic on national legislation will collect all the information in different countries to organize, to see what are the important elements to constitute national legislation. So this resolution recommended that registration is an element for consideration when enacting regulatory framework for national space activities. And also a national registry of space objects launched into outer space should be maintained by appropriate national authority. So these are the three relevant documents for further development in registration. Also, the guidelines on long-term sustainability and the guidelines on TCBMS improve the transparency and the confidence building measures. These documents also contain some elements on how to improve the registration regime. But anyway, among all these documents, registration practice resolution is the most important. So let's look at the content of this resolution. Adherence to the registration convention. The enhance of registration practice by recommending the accession to this convention. This is the basis for any common approach. It is not perfect, but it is important document. It is what we have so far, and there is no reason to destroy it, to complete deny it is not necessary. The value and accessibility of the worldwide use UN register relies on the familiarity in the type of information and its universal access from the need, without need to interpret indications. So this is what we have, and it's important for us to enlarge its application to ensure its consistent implementation in practice. The registration convention is still the core legal document for the international legal regime of space objects or registration. Harmonization of practice. In order to adapt this convention to the recent development, especially development in commercial space activities, appropriate additional information was identified. The registration practice resolution introduced a list of additional information that should be furnished in order to improve the registration practice. For example, geostationary orbit location, the operation status, decay or re-entry, moving a space object to a disposal orbit, and the website linked to the information of space objects. So each state, besides a national registry, you should have a website provide all the information about the space objects in your national registry. And following this resolution, UNWUSA represented a template for the implementation of this upgrade practice in 2010. This template provides orientation with such additional information may be given. Over the years, UNWUSA has provided a certain form for the stage one to provide information. So based on this resolution, they provided a further one. Achievement of complete registration. There's always some cases that there's a non-registration of space objects. There are some situations that this resolution wants to improve to find the appropriate state to push forward the registration. For example, non-registration by international governmental organizations because there is a lack of consensus among the member states. So they cannot reach agreement on which state should be the state of registry, who should provide this information, or who should be designated as the state of registry. And then the space object is not registered. So this resolution recognizes that the member states of a registration convention, they should push forward this negotiation process and to find the appropriate way to solve this problem. Also, there could be a joint cooperation launches, and the states, they cannot reach agreement on who to provide this information. So in these cases, they try to find a solution. But problem is that most of the non-registration happened with, for example, certain military satellite or that satellite waiting for someday to become alive. I'm saying that there might be political reasons why the state refuse or delay in registration. But this resolution, they cannot touch this kind of sensitive situations, and so there is no resolution, no solution in this regard. Information concerning changes in supervision. Changes in ownership has become a common practice. This could lead to a situation where an original state of registry having legal terms, jurisdiction, and control, but they do not have the de facto control over the space object. It is the duty of the state having the jurisdiction and control to make arrangement with the state responsible for the entity having the de facto supervision and control of the space object to reach agreement. It's easy if two states, they are both the member states of the registration convention, they are aware of their international obligations, responsibilities and the law obligations, and also they have legislation with regard to registration. So it's the A state is launching state, and it transfers a satellite in orbit to a company from state B. So these states, they should, during this transfer of ownership, they should reach certain agreement about what about the state registry? Because any company who has the ownership of that satellite, they are properly obliged under national law to register that space object. But the complicated issue is that the company cannot exercise control of that satellite. It maintains with the original launching state. So this could be something, and also the resolution saying that if there's a change in the ownership of the satellite, there should be this kind of agreement about how to register it and how to provide this changing information. The information has changed. They also provided this information to the UN. So there's a change in the international register. This is a reaction, a response to the commercial space activities. It has made the whole scene much more complicated than before. So let's sum it up. There is a trend towards improved transparency and expanding registration. The registration information is expanding. Although the Registration Convention is not officially a mandate, the convention is like that. And all the relevant legal documents, they are saying that this is not official interpretation or amendment to the Registration Convention, but somehow they expanded the Registration Convention. This also helped improve the transparency of space activities. No matter what, the universalization of the Registration Convention should be a common goal as the basis for a standardized legal regime for space object registration. The accession to this convention is beneficial not only for the state operating the space objects, to let the world know, I am the state launched this satellite, and also I am the state maintain jurisdiction and control over the space object, but also for non-space foreign nations. Then we can know who is the launching state and how many space objects are in the Earth orbit or floating away to further distance celestial body. So for the practical context of registration, a harmonized practice in line with space treaties is a permanent challenge. Clearly, there's no easy answer to say today we can have all the information about all the space objects has been launched into outer space at the UN. That can be tracked, can be traced by technology, but the public information in legal terms is not easy to achieve. So it is a permanent challenge to reach that status, to get as much as more information as possible. It is a permanent challenge because the reality is not always satisfying. Sometimes it's a disappointment. And also because there was some new development and to be anticipated. For example, in the future, the development of space traffic management system will raise new questions in the context of space objects registration. This is becoming an official agenda in the UN Corpus negotiation, space traffic management regime. With expanded space activities, with more manned flights, and with more space exploration, the re-entry of space objects, there's a need for a comprehensive space traffic management regime to guarantee a safe and interference-free access to outer space, operation in outer space and the return from outer space to Earth. To have that kind of regime, that management regime, we need to ensure space security, surveillance, and situational awareness. They will be becoming the upcoming agenda items in various fora, in the UN, in the ITU, in IADC, in different forums. In this context, confidence building measures, space trafficking management, tracking the location, knowing the function of space objects, and the correct registration of space objects are interrelated subjects. So these future developments, they have to be in line with Outer Space Treaty and Registration Convention, majorly in line to conform to the requirements of these space treaties. Because registration, no matter what, it clarifies jurisdiction and control, responsibility and liability in a sovereignty-free area. It is instrument for space traffic management. It is part of that management regime. Also, all the discussions regarding sustainable development of the space activities underlines the need for improved transparency. That means more information on registration. And also that means that the registration orientation of registration could be changed from for the need of traffic management or for security-oriented identification. So this is meaning that registration regime will facing more challenges in the future to tackle with the new challenges coming out in the future regulation of space activities. So basically, this is everything I would like to share with you regarding space objects registration, especially on the international legal regime. That is my focus. I didn't include much information on national registration, but if you want to know, I can give you certain information about China's registration regulations and practice. But I'd like to know what would you say, or do you have any questions or comments about registration, or do you have any personal experience of providing certain information to the United Nations? That would be quite interesting. The floor is yours. I'm waiting here.
Thank you, Dr. Wu.
Thank you.
We will open voices now for the questions. If there anyone want to ask.
شيخ ابو يعني ما عنديش اي معلومه بلاش
There's any. Anyone want to ask? Okay. Dr. Auni, you want to say anything?
How about I say something about China registration? We ratified the registration convention in the 80s, but we didn't have any law until 2001. There's a regulation on registration of civil space objects in China. It's only civil space objects. Over the years, the State Administration for Science and Technology of National Defense is in charge of collecting all the information and transferred it to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And then the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will provide the information to the United Nations. It seems a very smooth operation, a smooth process, but it is not easy in practice because most of the satellites, they were launched, the launching site in China, they were operated by the military. And the military are not very cooperative in this way with the state administration because they are equal, governmental and military. So in China, it doesn't have a good reputation in registering all the space objects launched by it in a timely manner over the years. As I mentioned, United Nations states and Russian Federation, they submitted information several times a year, sometimes 3 months and one more. But China do it on an irregular basis, sometimes several years, one submission. It's not that China is reluctant. It's only all because of bureaucratic thing. It is difficult for these all the governmental and military organs for them to cooperate together. But the good thing I have learned from last year is that they have been holding, it's difficult for them, but they are cooperating. They are saying that we realize that this has become an issue for China's space activities. This is not good for our international image, so we should work together more closely to improve the situation. And also, I have personally contributed provide some advices for them about how to improve this process, how to overcome all these bureaucratic problems, obstacles. So, and also we are we are drafting a national legislation. So there will be a national law, and then it would be easier for all these organs to work together to coordinate. So I'm saying that in the future, China will practice in registration will definitely improve in this regard. I would share a little bit information in this regard. Another thing about registration that is providing additional information. Our space lab, Tingle 1 and 2, especially Tingle 1, is they're supposed to have a controlled re-entry, but unfortunately it didn't work out. So in 1997, in 27, it is becoming deorbiting. It's slowly falling back. And there is a lot of international pressure on China saying that it is failing down because you are not doing a very good job. This may cause a disaster for the whole world. But we know that is not true. It is only panicking the public. It's only sending the bad message to make a fuss. Anyway, China has been providing information. It reacted very quickly and providing information to the United USA to introduce all the relevant information. What is the current status of Space One, the Tingle 1, and when it is expected to be falling back, and in what area it could fall back. So during the whole re-entry process, over a year, China provided quite several notifications, and also its website, the Manned Space Agency website, provides all the relevant, updated, very frequently, the information about the status. But this is a very good example of providing additional information because it's a space lab, but still it is very big space objects. It could cause something, and fortunately nothing happened. And also I personally participated in all these processes to provide information, to persuade them to be more transparent. To be more transparent, improve the transparency is also beneficial for China's government, for China's space activities, to prove that China is a responsible, clever, in this way. So this is why I'm very much interested in the registration regime, because I have seen that the attitude changing towards international law can make an impact in practice. This is something I would like to say, to share with you in this on this topic. So, Annie, I would like really looking forward to Annie. You might have some personal experience in this regard, providing information or collecting information about space objects. I know this has been a long day for you. You work from your office, and also you need to listen to all these lectures. Anything from anybody?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rouge. Anyone want to ask Dr. Rouge any question? Any question? Okay. Let us now the Regional Center for Space Sciences and Technology Education for Western Asia and all institutes that collaborate with us give you Dr. Wu Xiaodan many thanks for this huge information, and we hope that to join us on as soon as possible on other courses in the future. Thank you, and many thanks for the Regional Center for Space Science and Technology Education for Western in Asia and Pacific in China, and for all of you the attendance. Thanks for attending us. See you on other courses soon. Dr. Awni, you want to say anything?
Just I want to say goodbye to our distinguished professor.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed the 2 days past, which is really, we feel that this is topic about space law is very important for our area. It's a new topic, new subject, and we are very highly appreciating the way and methodology which you are giving us, especially you have good experience in China in space law. So I, again, on behalf of all participants and attendees, we thank you very much. And just we apologize. Today there was another actually virtual space lecture, which is was actually in fact in the same time, and there was overlap in the times. That's why otherwise the people, they were very much anxious to attend your lecture. But let's hope that we will do it again and again. And I take also again this opportunity to thank the executive director of the Regional Center of Asian Pacific China for his cooperation, and all of your colleagues, Professor Chian and others who were always very kind, so much kind to, cooperate with us. And next week on 7th, also there is again very important virtual lectures together. And thank you very much, with highly gratitude to you. And so we are so much happy. I wish you all the best and see you soon. Maybe in Jordan, we are welcoming you to, let's hope that this pandemic, COVID-19, we will fight it, you see, and I hope that we will success in fighting this actually pandemic. And it's regards and respect to all of Chinese nation and also to Behang University and the regional center. Thank you very much. So kind of you.
Thank you for having me. I spent really some time, very good time here in sharing with all the participants, and hope there will be chances for me to do this kind of cooperation again. Thank you for all the organization work.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. See you soon.
So kind of you.